everyone. Welcome to Sports Khabri with me, Aradi and Rishi, with the WTC final around. The race is heating up, dude. Just this year's WTC final, not a lot of things are still left unanswered. You don't know who's going to make it. India, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, all in the mix to make it to that final. It's going to be a lot of fun. And with the WTC final and the race heating up, there have been a lot of conversations about how the cycle is and how the final should be held. So far, we've seen that the WTC has been just the one-off fixture where we've had teams like India, Australia, New Zealand compete for the championship. India played the first one against New Zealand, lost that one, then against Australia and lost that one too. Both games taking place in at Lords in England. So it's a weird one because many would have said that India were probably the most dominant side going into those finals, especially the way they played both cycles, but did end up losing on both occasions because at the end of the day, it is a one off game. You have to turn up for that match. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. In light of that, popular Australian cricketer David Warner asked in the Fox commentary studio as to whether it should be a three-match series. Adam Gilchrist, who's played his fair share of Test cricket as well, I think responded quite well, saying that yeah, he thinks it should be a three-match affair where you play one game at Lords, one game from the one game at home for both teams, and that way it would sort of provide a more level playing field, or probably give you a better result. Warner's brought this up previously as well. He said this in 2023 before. He said, I've been, I won't say critical, but I do think it should be at least a three-game series with Test cricket only. You play 2 good years of you have to play 2 years of good cricket, then you play on a neutral venue against an opposition. We've all played here before, it but this game is not against the same host nation. So it's there's a lot of things to be discussed. Rishi, just straight away, are you happy with the current format, or do you agree that there needs to be a change? Three matches have to be played, one home game for each country and one at a neutral venue.
Dude, I think I tend to agree with what Warner said because, like he mentioned, like the nations are playing almost 2 calendar years worth of Test cricket. Like they're traveling everywhere to different parts of the world. They're playing a lot of home games, and then what's the point of all that if you're just coming and playing one single game in a venue? Like if England do happen to qualify, ultimately it's going to be advantageous for them, right? Like they're going to end up playing in a ground that is very like every home series they're going to play a game in Lords, so they're very much like accustomed to those conditions, of course. But the other nations, they're going to play in completely different scenarios, all for like they're all going to be well adjusted to those conditions, and then suddenly just for an isolated final they're going to have to travel to Lords. Like I feel that is a little bit unfair, and it's unfair to judge like a test team based on an isolated game because like over both the finals, both the years, I felt India were a really good test match, like a test side. And of course, at the end of the day, they fell short to both Australia and New Zealand. But then again, when you're playing one whole year of cricket or 2 whole years of cricket, I think it's a bit unfair that you decide it just on one game, and
Yeah.
especially if you're deciding it on one game on a neutral ground, like on a completely isolated ground. Like it only makes sense that you have at least a 3 match series. Like for me, I think tests are best when you have it like a 5 match series. But then again, if you want to keep it three, then you might as well have it three. Like Gilchrist said, one Lords, fair enough, it's the home of cricket. But then one at home and but one in each country of the finalists, basically.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Again, I think it's important to state that it's a little different from other tournaments or competitions because traditionally, what you see in an ODI World Cup or a T20 World Cup is the entire tournament takes place in the same place. So then you have a final, and yeah, whatever, like it's okay. But I think here it's a very, very different sort of setting. You're playing 2 years of Test cricket all over the world, and then you're playing one game in a country that you might not have you might not have been to during that cycle, like India might not have, for example, gone to England during that cycle, but then they have to play one game in England. It's very interesting because then you might have another country who's probably played 5 test matches in England, and for them it's a lot more advantageous, just the whole recency part of it. I think comes into it. So it's a very interesting conversation. Adi, what do you think? Da? Like, do you think are you happy? I'm just saying, like, I just want to also say that I'm not dissatisfied with what we have right now. I don't think it's the worst thing possible for Test cricket. I think I like the way that the whole WTC cycle is at the moment. At least what they've tried to do and try to come up with to make Test cricket more competitive and more fun. But yeah, Adi, what do you think about it?
I mean, firstly, with the aspect of it's more advantageous maybe for one team versus another, I don't think there is much into it. I feel like, especially with Lodge, I think it's a very neutral ground. I feel like every team that comes there can play there pretty well. For example, I know that I think England has won only one match since 2015 in Lords against you know South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and India, and that was against India in 2018. And since 2015, they've only won one game there. So I feel like Lords is to the cricket ground itself is pretty neutral. I feel like all teams come there, especially the away teams who come there, do pretty well. So in that aspect, I'm not that like okay. Yeah, I feel like only playing in Lords is not it's if it's unfair or like disadvantageous. But with the aspect of it being at least a 3 game series, that makes sense to an extent because again, we've always played test series when it comes, especially with the big teams. It's going to be always 5 games, 4 games, 3 games. I don't think any team is accustomed to like just playing one-off test series because you look at India, for example, in 2020, they lost the first test game. But if we never had a 4 test series that year in 2020, you would never see a 2-1 comeback. And I think that's the thing with Test cricket. It is always a game that needs to have at least 3 game series because you're going to have different rhythms coming into a test series, and it's a long time. That's the whole point of a test series. You play 5 day cricket for a long time. That shows which team is the best at the end of the series. I feel like if it was 3 days, at least, I mean 3 game series, I think it would be a fairer way to judge the champion, for
Mm.
example. But the only maybe problem with 3 days is again you can't have it three different areas. I think Gilchrist said, one home, one for each home country, and then in England.
Yeah,
I feel like if you do that, I think it's illogical in terms of traveling time. Going
yeah,
from
I
one
agree, bro.
country.
I agree.
I think that's the big issue because for example, if it's India and West Indies who are playing just for the sake of it, it's going to be you go to come to India, then you go to West Indies, and then you go to England. It's like it just doesn't make sense overall to like
Yeah, yeah,
have it in three different areas. I think I would like it to be like how we play the World Cup every 2 years. One nation gets to, just host the
mm.
Test Championship final. I think that's more fair.
Yeah. I agree, bro. And I think like, logistically, like the whole two home, one home game each, or whatever. Logistically, it doesn't make sense because I think already a 3 match series means that it's a month-long affair. That means you're going to play for an extended period. We know that cricketing schedules are already cramped. It's two already, and then you're saying go away, like go to both these countries, and then go to another neutral country. That means you're pushing it to say 40 days, 45 days, and to make it worse, I think you almost need like 5 6 days of time in each country to get accustomed to the conditions, right? Like it's unfair for like say if you say if you say to sort of I don't know, um with the West Indies or like say India, go and play in South Africa directly. You can't just go and directly play in South Africa. You need 3 4 days. You need to play at least a 3 day game to get used to the conditions. I don't think it's as simple as yeah, go to each country and just play. So the I think the time will it'll take almost it becomes almost 45 days. I think we don't have that time in today's cricket to give to like a 3 match series of that nature. But I think 3 match series is on the cards, especially if it's in one venue. Like Adi said, maybe like one country gets to host. We've got it's Lords is not the only big ground, right? In the world of cricket, you can go to the MCG. You go to in India, you've got Eden Gardens. You've got lot of sort of again test folklores from there. You go to
Cape
like you said,
Town,
yeah, you go to Cape Town,
Iceland.
Johannesburg, like you
Every
it's
ground, every country has a good test venue.
Exactly. We've got like, most countries have good test venues, like, and we're not short of anything at the moment. And I think it would be only fair if, like Adi said, bro, that one country hosts it every like cycle, right? Because right now you're limiting it to England, where you know you're going to get seam movement, you're going to get help from the weather. That's the sort of direction you'll go in. But if a country like India hosts it, or say a Sri Lanka or something like that, you get completely different. It's a completely different story. It's a completely different challenge. Imagine watching Australia versus New Zealand in Sri Lanka or something like that. Like, you get what I mean? Like, it's just so interesting. It's something completely unheard of. Or for example, watching India versus Pakistan in England. I feel like we need these kind of stories, like, in Test cricket. Just that fact, I think like a three-match series with one home, one away, I think just sort of doesn't work, because also you've done it in the cycle already. It's not like you haven't done it. You've played those. You would have most likely played either home or away against that nation. So I feel like again the need to do one home and away, not really necessary. Are you guys really that dissatisfied with the current format? Like, I don't think it's that bad right now.
The thing is, like, uh see, like, for regular nations, like most, like, frequent test playing nations, this won't impact them as much. But I remember in the England, I mean, Sri Lanka tour of England, Kumar Sangakkara was saying most of these players haven't even toured England, and there are no warm-up games. Like, back in the day, they used to have warm-up games. They used to get accustomed to the situations, and then by the time the test match started, they all know what they're getting into. Same thing Wasim Akram was saying about Pakistan touring England. Like, before recently, they hadn't toured in almost 15, 16 years. So they have no idea. Like, the good length balls which were coming up to at best knee height or like thigh height is going suddenly hitting the chest of Pakistani batsmen. So it takes time. It takes like practice. And of course, you can't give them like three, like, when you're playing a three-match test final, like World Test Championship final series, of course, you can't give them warm-up games. But if you give them at least three games, okay, if it's in the same country, like, if you give, like, by the time the three games come, like, they would have gone, at most they would have gone to the venue once before in the cycle, so they're almost somewhat accustomed. And by the time they go there, they practice for the three games, they have some level of confidence. Otherwise, it's just one game, that's too much at stake. Like, players won't be, of course, they're all athletes of the highest level, they need to handle the pressure, but then again, it's just suddenly unfair that you suddenly pluck them out and then drop them there and be like, okay, now perform. Like, it's just
Yeah,
so much
yeah,
better if you, like, all, especially for these play, like, these nations which haven't toured as much, if, and I think it'll benefit them a lot more if you can
yeah,
just, like, give them a little bit more breathing space.
yeah. And it is a very interesting, like, again, like something that we brought up is that, do you think everyone should play everyone equally? I know it's a hard thing to say in cricket, especially because your boards decide who you play. It's not ICC deciding India will play Australia or India will play England. It is BCCI saying, okay, we'll play 5 matches in Australia, 5 matches in England, because that's where the money is. Are we ever going to get to a stage, or do you guys think, like, is it even practically possible for ICC to say every team will have to play every team equally?
I mean, bro, even with this topic where, for example, England plays so many games versus someone like Australia or even someone like West Indies, which you don't get them playing a lot of games. I feel like the problem with right now, it's a 2 year cycle instead of a 4 year cycle. I feel like if you just push it into a 4 year cycle, make it another World Cup, I think you can elongate it and then fit in games easier, and much will be much easier to host games for each team and have a cycle which is more fair. I feel like having 2 years again, it's the same thing with T20. We already have 2 years T20 anyways going on every 2 years. So I would rather push a test cycle into a 4 years, make it a bit more prestigious. Like, for example, playing a final every 4 years is more prestigious than playing every 2 years. I mean, India's played the last 2 years, right? And they might again play next time. So instead of having this entire cycle, if you have like a proper three game series after 4 years, I think that has more meaning to it. Because if you have it every 2 years over, maybe in the short term it's fine, but in the long term, for the next 30, 40 years, if you want to sustain this, it gets a bit boring, and then you'll again have to change it, because
Yeah,
playing test for every 2 years and having a world test championship every 2 years, it just won't be able to, you won't be able to sustain it anyways. So I feel like if you give like 4 year cycle, or even if it means 3.5, 4 year, whatever it is in that ballpark, you keep the cycle that long, I think you can fit test series much fairer to every team. Because again, we have a huge issue with where like only India, England, Australia, when they play each other, you generally get 4 or 5 games. Apart from that, every other team plays very random, like sometimes two, sometimes three. And I think that's a big issue right now.
I think ideally, like even I would obviously, I think most cricket fans would love to see that, say that all teams play everyone, like every team plays every team equally. But that I think a lot of it has to come down not to the ICC but the individual boards. India, Australia, England saying, okay, for the betterment of the game, we'll make sure that every, like we go to like these countries or they come to, like we host them and we play a 3 match series everywhere. We don't play like whatever a 2 match series or a 1 match, just like the one-off test. But it's also down to the boards of, like I think, say like a South Africa, like now South Africa are playing Sri Lanka and they're playing a 2 match series. But it's also down to their boards and who have to proactively say, no, we'll make sure it's at least a 3 match series. Like I feel like individual boards have a lot, like to sort of, they've got the responsibility on their shoulders to take this forward. It's not so much the ICC. I don't like, what is the ICC's role, bro, in all of this? Like, I don't even
At best, they're
apart
like
from,
mediators. Like I don't think they have
yeah,
anything.
exactly. Yeah, man, I think it's just, I think ideally it would be great, but it's just hard. Again, uh, at the time of this video going out, at least at the time of recording, it's just so interestingly poised. I just want to finish it with this: India are top of the standings at the moment, the World Test Championship standings, 61.11 PCT, and then you've got South Africa in second because they beat Sri Lanka in the first test. This is such a weirdly interesting cycle. New Zealand lost their first test to England, so they're really almost out of the running. Even if they win their next 2 tests, I don't think it'll be enough. Australia 557.69. So it's really between Australia and South Africa. And it's going to be, it's heating up, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, just please do let us know in the comments as to what you guys think should happen with the World Test Championship final. Do you think it should be a 3 match series or more, or are you happy with what it is right now? Do you think that the boards of these big cricketing nations need to take a more proactive approach in making sure that they go to countries like Bangladesh, they go to countries like Pakistan, West Indies, play longer series and more number of games in these countries? And I think that is, of course, the ideal solution, but whether or not it's done is only a matter of time. I think we're doing a much better job. I think India have played most countries, I think, this cycle, right? We've played Bangladesh, we played Australia, England. Um, it just seems like New Zealand, so it looks a lot better. And of course, India, Pakistan, we just don't know when it's going to happen. So, um, but yeah, apart from that, it's been pretty good. I think it's been pretty positive this WTC cycle. But to see more of those games would be nice. Yeah, longer series against Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, all these countries. Even if they don't end up on the winning side, I think they need more of these kind of games, not playing non-test cricketing
So
nations.
even if they don't win, like if they can
Exactly.
get one win in a series, I think at the end of the day that will make a difference
Huge.
in the points
Bro,
tally.
that would be huge. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like now, Bangladesh, for example, going to Pakistan and winning there is huge. Like it
Sri
was
Lanka winning
massive.
that one test in England, that also made a huge difference.
I swear, like yeah, exactly. And West Indies doing it in Australia. So these are amazing stories that we need more of, right? Especially in Test cricket. So yeah, I think we just wrap it up with that, guys. Let us know what you guys think in the comments with regards to how the current WTC cycle is. Are you happy with it? Not? Let us know. Please like and share the videos. Thanks for watching, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Subscribe to Sports Kabli.